we go.
So this is what it's like to get sunburned. I got too cocky with my normal olive skin that tans, as you can see. So I had no idea that part of me that's not exposed to the sun often can actually get burned. Good morning, Jam. Good to see you. And there you go. This is the price of being cocky. You get to know what it's like to be a full-blown European. Lots of aloe. Yeah, that was the sled ride from yesterday. I'll be putting that on YouTube as well. So let's start our recording here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to anchor.fm/GabSmacked. It's a pleasure to see you or hear from you, or you hear from me. And we are talking today about anxiety, intolerance of uncertainty, sensory activities, and repetitive behaviors, Big Macs. So a relationship between certain factors here, repetitive behaviors, uncertainty, intolerance, anxiety, and sensory sensitivities. If they go up, what the point is that we're looking at is not whether they go up or down as we get older, those with autism, but whether they go up or down together. And so are they actually related, all related? And if they're all related, then there's a good chance that they are all affected by one particular cause that we would then have to look for. It would narrow down what you're looking for as a cause. It's like a domino effect. If they're all related, then you just have to go back to the inception, the Big Bang of whatever's causing this issue. So autistic adults, there are some people that there aren't enough studies with autistic adults, and that's one of the reasons that they've got me as a contributor there. Being someone who, as an autistic adult, can also function highly and also has done heaps of research and therapy and has the savant stuff, so I can remember a lot of things that they need. And autistic adults have been found, obviously, to have a higher intolerance of uncertainty and anxiety scores. So it's found that there is anxiety based upon intolerance of uncertainty. There seems to be a relationship. You don't know if one causes the other or not. That's what they're trying to look for, of course, as well. And intolerance of uncertainty, yes, there is a much higher degree of uncertainty intolerance, Boss Briggs, Cassie, Jerry, good to see all of you, for people with autism. And I am suggesting some hypotheses to the university as to why that might be the case. And of course, they know much of the stuff I'm talking about as well. But I don't want to talk about anything specifically that I said to them. Obviously, that's all private until they publish their reports, Platinum Mimi. So obviously, I'm not going to infringe upon that or impinge upon that. But I will talk in general. Hello, my dear, where it has been found that with adults with autism, that repetitive sensory motor behaviors and hyposensitivity, as well as hypersensitivity, decrease significantly with age for autistic adults. So just to explain the difference in hyper and hyposensitivity, they are both deviations from the mean of sensitivity for the general populace. And if you think of hypothermia, that means that it's a deficiency. Hypo is different to hyper. It's the opposite. Hyper is extra, and hypo is a deficiency. So hypothermia would be lack of heat, and that's why you can die of hypothermia in the cold. That's the best way to remember what hypo means. So hypersensitivity means that you are extra sensitive to sensory behavior. If it's hypersensitivity to, in my case, it's a lot of the auditory stuff is a problem. So, but also visual actually does have an impact as well. And hyposensitivity means that you have a decreased sensitivity. Thanks for sharing. To the sensory input. But either way, it's either an increase or a decrease, so it's a deviation. So you can call it the tail end of the distribution on either side. So if you have most things that are normally distributed end up in a bell curve, and where you have the average around the middle, and then as you get further away, there are less and less elements that populate further away from the mean in terms of deviations. Edge case, exactly right, Jerry, yeah. So there are the edge cases on either side, and they're saying that there's a travel towards the mean. So that means that Faster Clark, aka Random Girl, good to see you, on both sides of the issue, whether you're extra sensitive or have decreased sensitivity, both of them with age move towards the middle, so you look more neurotypical, Trace in the AK. Now, this measurement I submit in general is to do with, and I think this is something that many studies of autism sort of recognize as well, is not a decrease because people grow out of autism, but because they learn skills on how to deal with those issues that they face. And I've told you about many of those. So for me, I carry earplugs with me wherever I go and in public. And I also deliberately situate myself in environments which have less noise in general. My room is definitely made in such a way with a specific structure for that. And many people might find that they have those issues as well. And it also doesn't factor in the people with autism that end up committing suicide because they can't handle it. And so the only people that survive are the ones who've been able to find some way to mitigate those symptoms that they suffer from. And of course, that will help increase anxiety. So it increases anxiety, I submit. You learn to cope, yes, because it takes a lot of mental energy to have to deal with those situations. And that mental energy, knowing that the mental energy has to be expended before you expend it, is where the anxiety comes in. It's the fact that you have a memory of the fact that you had to do it before and you're going to have to do it again. But then you've also got past memories of when you were a child and growing up of having to have to do that and not knowing how to deal with it. So I have very clear memories of being a kid having to run away from the swimming pool at my grandma's house when everyone was playing and go into this. She had a bathroom that was a guest bathroom, and it was situated in such a way that it would get almost no sunlight, and it was very quiet. So I would go and sit in there and just sit there. Does reefer help autism? I wouldn't know, Fischler. And by sitting there in silence, it allows the brain to actually calm down. And I don't know why I was actually saying that. I actually lost my memory as to why I was saying that. I think so. The memories I have of those stresses continue with me as the adult person. Sensory deprivation chamber on a lesser scale. Exactly. Yes, hypersensory. Thank you. I'll just pause chats for a quick sec while I answer this one or talk about this topic. The memories of those actually compound today when you have situations where you know you're going to have to expend mental energy again because of hypersensitivity to noise. And so the past memories combined with knowing you have to do it again actually compound and create even more anxiety. So you get a double anxiety. It's like a double Big Mac. You get an anxiety on top of anxiety. So I would say that that's one of the reasons that the anxiety actually doesn't go away, but you learn to not vocalize it in the same way. You learn, like myself, to jump on Periscope and build up a dictionary of words that I try to remember on a daily basis in order to articulate the nexi between these certain correlation or correlated behaviors. And I was definitely not able to do that years ago. There is a letter actually that my original guests saw when I was 16, and I wrote this articulate letter. So I did have some writing skills back then, yes, because I read a lot. Now, the next one here is that intolerance of uncertainty. Intolerance of uncertainty is a pretty difficult one. And I hypothesize, and I've suggested this to many different universities and doctors and stuff over the years, is that with autism, and this part everyone knows who studied autism, is that there's an inability to distinguish between or prioritize which information is processed by the brain before the other information. So as I'm talking to you, my brain can hear the cicadas outside. There was a dog that barked 2 blocks down. My fan just doesn't stop, but I need it because of the heat. I'm sensitive to the fact that it's on which parts of my skin are feeling that air. I can hear Honest Joe in the kitchen, and then I can hear the murmuring of my some other family members in another room that's sealed off. And the brain doesn't actually know intuitively which one is more important to focus on. So I have to mentally, and I just heard the curtain, I have to mentally remind myself to keep talking to you guys. And that mental reminder is a conscious reminder, and that expends a lot of energy. So it takes a lot of energy to keep doing that, and so it can exhaust you. And because of that, that can lead to the anxiety because you know you're going to have to face it every time you leave your personalized sensory deprivation chamber, to use Fustercluck's pretty good analogy, or awesome analogy. Right? And so now I just heard a car go past, but it wasn't here. It was 2 blocks down. So those type of things, they all sound the same in my brain, and I think many people with autism have the same sort of issue. And they were asking me, what would you suggest on ways to help mitigate that for children with autism? And I said what I think is important is that parents have a user-friendly guide in shopping malls, for example, where there are autism-friendly levels. So for me, one of the most traumatic experiences in shopping malls as a kid was the food court. And the food court was when my mum would drag me through the food court, not drag, but when we'd have to go with our parents as a kid through there to go to the other shopping places, to the groceries, the veggies or whatever, it would cause tremendous anxiety. And I would have fears of going through that section. And obviously, my parents wouldn't have known. They would never have known. Most people today don't even know, right? So that's one of the reasons I talk about this, so that future children have the benefit of their parents knowing this, so that when they go through supermarkets, they go through secluded areas. So I used to travel from one side to the other if I could, especially as I became a teenager and I could go without my parents to the shopping mall, etc., I would buy computer parts or whatever. To get to the other side, I would, no joke, go either 2 floors up to go around and then back, or I would walk all the way around to stay away from people. And I couldn't understand how other people didn't know that. I thought it was so obvious. So that's one of the things I think, autism-friendly guides in shopping malls, etc. Let me see your comments. The intolerance of uncertainty doesn't go away. What I've learned to do, I'm very unusual in the sense that I actually face the uncertainty. I deliberately screw up my day sometimes so that I am immersed within the uncertainty and learn to accept being in an uncertain situation and breathe deep and learn to know that it's okay. It still takes a lot of effort. So a week from now, my whole life is about to change. And I'll be talking to you more about that soon, very soon. And, there's a huge amount of uncertainty around that. And that would stress even a regular person. But someone with autism, yes, is going to have even more stress in those type of situations. When one becomes an adult, they just learn how to deal with it better if they have survived, and a lot of therapy, Chewbacca. And so they appear to have been, quote unquote, cured of the autism, which is not true. It's the underlying issues are still there, and they still have, what I've come to learn, I shouldn't talk about everyone, what I've come to learn is that by mitigating the phenotypic traits of autism that deviate to regular phenotypic traits of the population mean, say the neurotypical mean. By mitigating those, I actually am more listened to. I function better in real life. I've learned to do that. So when I say real life, in public, if I go to buy something from the shop, I learned that I have to wait my turn. I wait for someone to say, can I help you? Which is actually doesn't work in Lebanon, because in Lebanon, they don't say, can I help you? They expect you to ask them, can you help me? It's so funny. It's the reverse. So I remember once I stood at a bank in Lebanon in the queue, and I was waiting for about 7 minutes. I kept waiting, and the guy just kept looking down and working and working. And after 7 minutes, I think the person behind me said, you have to ask him. So that was quite strange. Same with restaurants over there too. With the waiter, you have to go, excusez-moi, garçon, over there. Yeah, crazy stuff. So the inability to distinguish between what data is important, that's a hard one. Even as an adult, I am very lucky that I have people around me, especially my doctor that I see every Wednesday, to figure out what's important in my priorities. And not just what is important, but why. Why is it? Because that's how you help someone with autism function without the intuitions of context. You say, why? Now, I'll give you another example. Do you agree with interpretations? Do you have any other suggestions? Now, that doesn't have context around it. And when I say it doesn't have context, it doesn't have context that someone with autism can understand. So context matters, and context is something that neurotypicals assume that they get and that other people get. And for more than 50% of the time, they're probably right. When they misunderstand, that's why they have these fights, I think. In my case, my brain does not see context unless it's been taught, and I have to use logical explanation. So one example is, as I told you guys before, there was that kid that was touching females' knees and rubbing them because he thought that's how you get a girlfriend, because he saw other guys doing that. But the context around the other guys doing that was that the other guys were in a relationship with those girls. Excuse me. Which is why they already had permission from the female in that particular observation by that kid for the guy to touch them on the knee. Yeah, I have clothing sensitivity, absolutely. So absolutely clothing sensitivities. That's funny you say that, because I just assume that they were the sensitivities I get when people touch me. I don't really like being touched at all. I've tried a huge amount of therapy actually, but it just doesn't change for some reason. Now, if someone says to you, do you have any suggestions? Now, someone with autism, is very hard to answer that because you don't know what that means. Do I have any? Does that mean I'm supposed to tell you? Or do I just tell you the number of suggestions I do have? So like, and people would find this funny because someone might say to me, and this happened when I was growing up, someone might say to me, do you have any thoughts? And I'll say, yes, I do. And then that's the end of the conversation, because there's an implied, well, if you do have thoughts, can you tell me those thoughts? But that wasn't said. So the person with autism doesn't realize they have to do that. Right? And it's sort of funny, but that's actually what happens. What was worse about the food court versus other areas? Added smells, sounds, the population density was quite huge, and it was erratic because people moving backwards and forwards and eating, and it was gross, and you could hear people chewing, and it was just the whole thing. It was just, hey, hello, how often do you feel attacked unfairly? How often? It would be at least daily, probably every day, and it's most of the time it's unintentional, and it happens with the people that you love. They will completely do something which is overtly offensive and from the mind of the autist, but it's not in any other circumstance. So much of my therapy also revolves around that, explaining situations and having the context around them explained by my therapist. And I'm lucky because of the savantism that I can remember the context in all of those situations. Because with autism, you cannot extrapolate a context over a set of contexts. I cannot say, for example, that because I know I'm not allowed to touch a girl on the knee, that I can't touch her on the shoulder. On the shoulder, sorry, I touched my elbow, but the elbow. When you say you can't touch a girl on the knee unless she's your girlfriend, for example, they'll say, okay, but that means I can touch her on the shoulder. Right? So you have to be very specific. In fact, you've got to say, no, it's not just the knee, it's any part of their body. And in fact, it's not just their body, but a circumference around them with a radius of at least 1 foot. So that, in my mind, that's what I do. If we're in a crowded space, it's about half a foot. If it's in a public space, it's 3 feet, or even up to 3 meters. Conversation transition, exactly correct. And so that's why one-on-one conversations are very easy for me. Hearing is more intense. Let me answer that in a second. the more than one-on-one, then I have no idea what's going on. And it's very hard to track who's talking about what, because they are changing context constantly. They're context hopping. And so I was like, but you're just talking about the book. Why are you talking about the TV? I don't understand. And then they'll think you're dumb, or you're, and they'll go, oh, but you should know better. You're so smart. And it's like, well, no, that's the point. It's mind blindness. And so it's an invisible condition, especially with high functioning autism. How do you deal with the misperception? Very badly up until recently. So huge anxiety, stay away from people, getting extremely mad, furious, blaming the world, hating the world, becoming resentful, all of those things you go through growing up. Now I accept that the misunderstandings happen, and I've come to learn, and this is why GabSmacked, this channel, is so focused on perception. And in fact, regular people, non-neurodivergent or neurotypical people actually have the same problem, but because it's more subtle, they just have arguments instead of, like in my case, because I had so many misunderstandings of me, then I have now learnt consciously to say, there's a misunderstanding. Where did it happen? How did it happen? It's possible to have two different versions of the same events, which is, as you guys know, that's what I talk about all the time when it comes to news and politics, etc. And a lot of people hear that and go, oh yeah, I didn't see that. And I'm like, the reason you didn't see it is because you didn't have to. Sort of like someone who's an alcoholic. They have a tendency to gravitate towards alcohol. And so to get over that, they actually become much more aware of the dangers of alcohol than someone who just has one drink a month or something like that. Because the person having one drink a month it's not a priority on their list to study all of the negative effects of alcohol, because it's not affecting their lives in such a dramatic way that they need to do so. Same thing with someone like myself. Because I don't naturally understand perception, then I had to over-understand perception. And now I can help everyone else, I find, on the GabSmacked channel. Is my hearing more intense? That it's not the hearing that's super, it's the brain's inability to distinguish between sounds, and so I hear everything. So when you go into a restaurant and you're having a conversation with someone, your brain doesn't hear what everyone else is saying. But if you hear your name, you know this, right? If you hear your name, or if a mother hears a baby crying, right, your ears prick up immediately, right? And how many mothers have had children and you know this? No one else can hear the baby, but you hear it immediately. And so your brain is automatically filtering out all of this information that it is deeming to be unnecessary. And because my brain doesn't do that, my brain hears everything and doesn't filter it out. So I can hear all these different languages, all these different people. So I end up remembering, because of the savantism combined with that, I can remember all the different languages. I know what languages were being spoken, if they were Indo-European or not, what were the words being used, which was similar to other words in other Indo-European languages, or whether it was a Semitic language, and which pronunciation they're using. When they pronounce an L, are they putting the L all the way to their palate, or if it's only a millimeter off their palate? And the millimeter off the palate is something that Germanic languages do. You can start to distinguish all of these things. So it looks like a superpower, but it's not. It's in fact, it's the opposite. It's a disability or an impairment that gives you a apparent super ability, if that makes any sense. Okay, so let's get to picking up on euphemism. Yeah, absolutely, it happens all the time. So you had to fight against anxiety. It is awful. Yeah, the original Rain Man, I scoped about him a week ago. Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. The original Rain Man didn't have autism. He had something that I don't remember what it was called, but his abilities were vastly superior to mine. Yeah, in the savant style. Yeah, 100%. Do I have a heightened sense of smell? It's everything. So it's not a heightened sense. In other words, the brain doesn't block out stuff in the way it does for neurotypicals. So you might not notice certain things happening right now, wherever you are, that if I was there, my brain would be conscious of them. That's the difference. My brain is more conscious of data that flow in, as opposed to the neurotypical brain. And it actually exhausts the brain, but it gives you extra ability, so you can learn Italian and French at the same time and stuff like that. But it doesn't mean that, so it's heightened in your brain's consciousness of it, not as in the instrument used. So my ability to smell is probably nowhere near as good as most females. But I would be more aware, I guess, of what smells they were, and I could pinpoint where I first smelt them, or a very strong memory around them, and I'd be very specific about dates and times of where the memory occurred, etc. So when I was at school, I was bullied an insane amount. But I've come to realize in hindsight that a lot of people who bullied me were bullying me because what they found from my behavior was abhorrence, or a degree of abhorrence. And I've had to accept that makes sense, because at school I was walking like this all the time, and I hadn't yet learned to straighten myself out, and I'd be going blah, blah to people all the time, because I thought that's how you get attention, that's how you speak, and it was helping my Tourette's. And so it makes sense that the teachers and students would think that I was just a troublemaker. I'm not saying that it makes it acceptable, that there's a difference. But I have to accept that it wasn't just that I was just regular or looked regular and I was sweet and hi, how are you, and someone punched me in the face. No, it wasn't that simple. It doesn't mean that I was wrong. There's a difference there. It's just what we call context. If anyone wants to read Born on a Blue Day. Born on a Blue Day, a guy called Daniel Tammet. He has less of my abilities to integrate into society, but more of the savant abilities. So his mathematics abilities, in terms of calculations, are way advanced on mine, but I can drive and he can't. So it's almost like I've lost a bit of savantism to somehow have my personality coalesce into the greater society, where his is still more deviated, but he's still got extra savant abilities.